Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at this Your Overseas Home webinar, with today's session focusing on starting your buying journey for a property in Italy. My name's Hannah Armstrong. I'm one of the team here at Your Overseas Home, and I'm going to host us through today's session. You may know us as Your Overseas Home, and you may also have come across us as our sister business, Property Guides. Our group as a whole have been assisting buyers with their property purchases for over 10 years now. We do this by offering you useful resources, connecting you with leading experts in the industry, helping you to avoid pitfalls, help you save money, and crucially make it as exciting and enjoyable as possible for you. Now, our recent survey of European property buyers told us that on average, just over half of you are wanting to retire to Europe at some point in the short future. So whether it is that retirement property or whether it's just a holiday home that you're looking for today, we're delighted to have you joining us in this session, and we're happy to be able to help your purchase become a reality. Now, I'm joined by 4 buying experts on Italy today. First up, you'll hear from Trevor Charnley of Smart Currency Exchange, and then Daniel Shillito of D&G Property Advice. Then we'll move on to Filippo Corri of Great Estates, and lastly, you'll hear from Fanny Orsini of Dipina Notaries. Now, today's session, we will cover topics such as starting your buying journey from home, what you can be doing at the moment whilst we've still got our travel restrictions in place, how to think about planning your budget, how to start finding the right property and connecting with estate agents, and lastly, once you've found the dream property, what you need to know next in terms of the legalities so you can actually get your purchase over the line. For those of you who are joining us live today on this slightly rainy Saturday morning in the UK, if you've got any questions that you'd like to put to the panelists, do pop those in using the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, we as a panel have also got some questions that we would like to put back to you, our listeners. So again, for those of you joining us live, if you could fill in the polls using the right-hand side of the screen, all your answers on there are confidential, but we'll weave some of those into the presentation today to make it as relevant as possible for you. So without further ado, we will talk about the buying journey. Now, obviously, as I mentioned there, we've still got some restrictions in place around travel. So you might want to start thinking and doing your own reading and research from home. If you haven't already, we strongly recommend you head to the Property Guides website and download one of our buying guides. They're there to provide step-by-step information onto the process and useful checklists. We've got country-specific guides. We've also got guides on immigration, on currency transfers, how to get the most out of your viewing trips, advice on healthcare's visas, all sorts of information like that. Within our business, we've got a fantastic content team who produce those guides, but they also are out and about on the ground looking at the latest market updates and insights and producing regular articles and content pieces. They're again all available completely free on the site and also by subscribing to our newsletters. So once you've started the research, you've downloaded the guide, you've been reading up and you're ready to go, the first thing you're going to want to think about is how much budget you have got to spend on that property purchase. So I'd like to introduce Trevor Charnley from Smart Currency Exchange first to talk about the currency side of the budgeting process. Now, Trevor's worked within foreign exchange for over 10 years across a range of different businesses in this industry, and he's really well placed to help answer your queries and make sure you've got the right plan in place for getting your sterling turned into euros. So welcome today, Trevor. Can I ask you to start by giving us a little bit of background into Smart Currency Exchange and how you can help the customers who are listening to us today?
Absolutely, thank you for the welcome. So Smart Currency's been in the market for about 17 years, and we literally help thousands of overseas property buyers every single year. We engage with customers through the entire buying journey and help them both understand how their budgets work, help them understand the underlying currency movements and how that's going to impact them, and also help them with the different products and services that are available to ensure that they secure their property at the right money that they're budgeted for initially. As a business, we over-index in property transactions, so it really is a key specialism for us. And therefore, as a result, we really get to grips with that full end-to-end buying process and engage with customers very early on when they're in their initial research phases, and not necessarily just at the very end of their journey when they're actually looking to make that underlying transfer. So we are there as an excellent resource to help customers from the absolute outset in terms of understanding their budget right through to completing on the property.
Great, thank you, Trevor. Fantastic introduction there to Smart. So in terms of the different types of transactions and the different products that you're able to offer, could you just give us a little bit of an insight into the different ways that customers might work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would always recommend getting in touch with us at the absolute outset. When your currency isn't the most exciting part of the overseas property journey by any stretch of the imagination, but it is absolutely essential. So we would always recommend that you get in touch with us very, very early on, even if it's just that initial 5 to 10 minute conversation, so that you can get to grips with understanding what your budget is. Where you've got an amount of sterling that you've perhaps got to go and make that overseas property purchase. You're going to want to understand how that translates into euros, and you're also going to want to understand how that potentially impacts over the life cycle of an overseas property purchase. I mean, to give you an example, so over the last 3 years, sterling euro is a relatively non-volatile currency pair. However, the average movement over the last 3 years on an annual basis is 10%. So you can imagine that from the day that you start your research looking at your properties of a certain value to the time that you actually complete on that property, perhaps 3 months later, 6 months later, depending on how you're going through that process, the actual impact to you in terms of the sterling amount that you might need to pay for that property could fluctuate as much as 10%, which is significant. And at which point it's really important that you engage with us early so that you can understand your budget, and you can also understand those different products and services that are available. So, for example, one of the most common products that are utilised when it comes to an overseas property purchase is something called a forward contract. What a forward contract does is it allows you to agree an exchange rate today for delivery or for execution at some point in the future. So, for example, where you've gone through your initial research phase and you've actually found that property and you're going to place an offer and the offer's accepted, at that point you could feasibly agree your exchange rate on a forward contract, secure that exchange rate, and we would only expect to receive the monies for that payment, and we would only send that payment on in, say, 3 months' time or 6 months' time, or whatever the date is that we agree. What that means for you as a property buyer is that once you agree that euro price on day one, so say you've agreed your euro price of 250,000 euros, we would agree the exchange rate equating to, say, £200,000. And in 6 months' time, irrespective of what's happened in terms of currency rates, that €250,000 property is still going to cost you exactly £200,000 because you've already agreed that exchange rate on day one, utilising a forward contract. For you as a customer, that's really important because it means that you've got no surprises. So 6 months down the line, when you come to actually complete on that property, suddenly your £200,000 property isn't going to cost you £220,000. You've already agreed the exchange rate, it's already done, and at which point you can have that safety and security during the buying process that you know exactly how much that €250,000 property is going to cost you in sterling. There are other products and services available. Some customers will utilise what's known as a basic spot contract. What that means is that when you actually need to come to make that transfer to complete on the property, we would agree an exchange rate on the given day. You would send us the sterling and we would send out the euros. The challenge with a spot contract, particularly around things like property purchase, is that you've got that potential fluctuation between the time that you view that property and agree the price of that property to the time that you complete, as I've suggested, potentially 10% movement, which can be huge. They're the types of products and services that are available, and ultimately engaging with a currency expert, and specifically one that is heavily focused on property purchase and property sale, is really, really important, because we will give you all the options that are available to you, talk them through with you in simplistic terms, and at which point that leaves you being able to make an informed decision. One of the biggest pitfalls when it comes to things like currency, it's often an afterthought. You do the exciting bits first. You go and start to view properties online and start to do your kind of shopping around and research, etc. and you kind of leave the currency aspect to the back end because that's probably the least interesting bit. It's really important to engage early and understand what your budget is, what the currency pitfalls could be, and what the products and services are that are available to help mitigate that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Trevor. That's really, really helpful. You mentioned there about the forward contracts and said they were, a popular option for the property buyers. Can you just talk to us a little bit in a bit more detail about what would happen if a customer had booked a forward contract and their purchase was delayed, or we hope it never happens, but if their purchase fell through, what they do in those circumstances?
Sure. So when we book a forward contract, we would agree an end date, so a date that we're expecting that transaction to complete. However, as I've suggested, as a company that heavily engages with property buyers and property sellers, we acknowledge and we understand that dates move, simply put. So therefore, we are very, very flexible when it comes to dealing with customers that are making those overseas asset purchases. So, for example, if you were to secure a full contract for, say, delivery in 3 months' time, and actually we're approaching the completion date, and it turns out that things are able to be completed a couple of weeks early, for example, that's not an issue at all. Engage with us, talk to us, and we will, what's known as, draw down that contract. So we'll execute that contract early to meet your relevant dates. Equally, in the same breath, should dates move in the other way, and unfortunately sometimes they do, they get delayed, at which point we will do exactly the same thing. So we'll do what's known as a roll. So again, engage with us, make sure that we're having that clear line of communication, and we will move that completion date for you on the currency contract going forward. And to your final point, should the property purchase or sale actually fall through in its entirety? Again, typically where that happens, many of our customers actually then move on to another property. So it isn't simply a case that the property purchase or sale falls through and subsequently they give up on their plans of moving overseas or getting that holiday home overseas. Normally it will move on to a second property, at which point, again, exactly the same scenario. Engage with us. We understand these things happen. We deal with this all day, every day, and at which point we will move that end value date and we'll adjust that contract in the market. If it does get to a scenario where that property purchase or sale completely falls through and actually you decide that you're not going to go ahead at all, and actually you're going to maintain your position in the UK, at which point what we'll do is we'll sell that currency back into the market, and of course it's a contract at that point. So if there are any costs associated with that, then of course that would be as a result of. So we would expect that to be paid for, or indeed there may be a profit associated with that which would be paid back. So it's completely dependent on which way the exchange rates have moved at that point.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you so much, Trevor. And for all of these services, and particularly these forward contracts that take quite a lot of time and support from your team, how does Smart Currency, price that? What are the fees that a customer would pay for your services?
Sure. So during the typical buying journey, a customer, if they engage with us, they will probably spend somewhere between 4 and 5 hours with one of our currency experts over a 6-month period. And that's through a various different rationales. So we'll talk customers through products, services, etc. We'll often be talking customers through individual exchange rates. So the market moves all the time as a result of various different things, and a lot of our customers will want to talk to us and engage with us and understand why currency rates are moving. So a typical buying journey, a customer will spend between 4 and 5 hours on the phone with one of our currency experts. We don't charge a specific fee for that service, so we don't operate in the same fashion as, say, a conveyancer or a lawyer or an agent or whatever it may be. We don't charge by the hour or a specific fee for that service. We act in this instance as a wholesaler, if you will. So we buy approximately £4 billion worth of currency every year as a business. As a result of that, we command a certain price from the interbank market when we buy and sell currency, and at which point we sell that onto our customers with a margin in the middle, and that's how we make our money. So when the contract is agreed, that's the point where we make our money for the services that we've provided. So we don't charge an upfront fee. There's nothing specifically called out. we make our money in the exchange rate.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that for us today, Trevor. Now I'm going to ask you to get your crystal ball out and and tell us what's going to happen in the future. I know this is an incredibly difficult question, but you mentioned there obviously about, over the past few years, people could have 20, 30,000 euros difference in what they would be able to afford. Do you and your team, create any sort of forecasts? Do you have any idea of what might happen to the rate between sort of now and the end of the year?
If I did, I don't think, with all respect, I'd be here this morning. I think I'd probably be living on the beach somewhere in the Caribbean, to be frank. But I think that with that being said, we're always here to guide and assist customers and give them as much of a view as possible, both in terms of where we are comparatively speaking to where we've been historically, and what is coming up in the future that prospectively could move currency exchange rates. If you look at how we are currently performing on sterling euro, so as we're in a comparatively good spot. So if you look at, again, the 12-month charts, etc., the lows that we experienced in September 2020, we're currently about 8% better off than we were in September 2020. So on sterling euro, we're not in a bad spot at all. That is largely driven because of the positive UK vaccine rollout. So at which point a lot of investor money flying into the UK, into the FTSE 100, we're obviously seeing significant movements in terms of UK stocks as well. But as a result, that results in a high demand for sterling, and therefore sterling has appreciated versus euro. In terms of what may happen over the next 6 to 12 months, it really is a tough one. A lot of it is largely going to be driven down to how the European vaccine rollouts progress over the next 6 to 12 months. Investors are largely seeing the UK as a positive place to put their money right now, and therefore that is keeping sterling euro high. But of course, should we start to see a more positive outcome from the European vaccine rollouts over the next 6 months, we may very well see a shift of monies back towards euro, and subsequently perhaps see sterling euro come off a little bit. So it is largely driven down to the underlying COVID situation. It's interesting that Brexit largely has we saw some pretty major impact at the back end of last year, but post that, Brexit has largely been discounted when it comes to currency rates. It's all been about COVID for the time being. It would be interesting to see as we progress the next 6 to 12 months whether Brexit comes back to the fore, and subsequently we see those movements in the result. Hopefully that that answered your question without necessarily pretending that I'm Mystic Meg. So.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you so much for that, Trevor. I'm conscious of our time today, and there's a lot of questions coming in, and a lot of people wanting to speak with our other panelists. So we will move on for now. But Trevor, if we've got time at the end, we will circle back around and get some more questions to you. And if not, we will share Trevor and his team's details with all of the listeners today, so you can contact his team directly as soon as you want to. So. Moving on from the currency and the budgeting point of view, you might want to secure a little bit of extra money to help with your purchase, and to discuss lending options and other aspects of the sort of finances around buying. I'm joined by Daniel, who's a qualified financial advisor. His business, D&G Property Advice, specialise in supporting and managing all stages of your property purchase in Italy. So, Daniel, I'd love it if you could start by giving us a bit of an introduction to D&G Property Advice and what you can do and how you can support our buyers today.
Sure can. Thank you, Hannah. Appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity today. I hope everybody's having a great start to the weekend, despite the weather in the UK at least. Okay, well, personally, I might just mention that for those of you who don't know me, I'm a financial planner and qualified here in Italy, based in Milan. And also a CPA accountant. I don't work anymore directly in accounting, but I have been a CPA accountant in the past. I'm also a mortgage broker and a property consultant. And here in Italy, about 4 or 5 years ago, we started the brand D&G Property Advice, really to try and create a service solely focused upon the buyer and the buyer's interest when buying property in Italy. So what we do is we help people buy property in Italy as smoothly as possible in the Italian environment. This includes access to mortgages, some financial plans around why buying is right for you at the moment and how to go about it, how to set up the purchase the correct way, how to make the buying process as smooth as possible. And we essentially project manage the buying process for our clients who come from all over the world. We started around 4 years ago. I'm the D in D&G. My business partner is Giovanni. He's an American Italian that's lived in Italy for over 20 years. I've lived here for over 10 years. And we're a team of 3, but we also have contacts throughout Italy in all various parts of the buying process to help people get their purchase done as best as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Daniel. That's really helpful intro. So I want to draw on your mortgage broker expertise in particular today. And I just wanted to, Trevor mentioned this as well, contacting Smart Currency Exchange as early as possible in the process to understand what your sort of currency risk might be and what your budget might be. Does the same apply for mortgages? How early do people need to think about mortgages and what they could potentially borrow?
It does, absolutely. That's one of the things that we offer to do for people. We get lots of mortgage inquiries, and what we can do is first see if you're going to be eligible from a financial point of view with an Italian bank. Clearly, that's one of the most important things to do if you're not sure, is to understand what your borrowing ability might be and learn a little bit about the parameters the banks use to assess you for a mortgage. The bank also relies a lot on their own technical and legal due diligence on the property itself. So you won't receive a formal offer until the bank has actually spent a lot of time analysing the property that you find. So it's not a case in Italy of arriving, showing your financial situation to a bank before you have a property, for example, and the bank being able to say you're approved for a mortgage, because at least 50% of that process from the bank's point of view is analysing the property itself. I think that's important. People need to appreciate that in Italy. However, upfront, we can definitely look at your financial situation, how much you're looking to borrow, etc., and see if it's possible while you're doing your property search.
Great advice. Thank you, Daniel. Now we asked a question of the audience today, and actually the answers have been quite varied this time. People are obviously thinking about their income as and what they could potentially borrow based on their income, but also the property value. Can you give any indication of sort of average amounts that people could expect to borrow, particularly in relation to the value of their property?
Sure. Typically for those buying in Italy who have foreign currency incomes like sterling income or American dollar income, Australian dollar income, South African, or various other countries, typically Italian banks that lend around 50% of the purchase price of the property. Now that can occasionally increase a little bit to 55 or 60%, but typically 50% is a good rule of thumb. Now, if you happen to be an Italian overseas or married to an Italian overseas and you're looking to buy back in Italy, occasionally Italian banks will increase that percentage a little, but typically for non-residents, that's the percentage you can expect to borrow.
That's very helpful, thank you. And in terms of sort of lengths of time on mortgages, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, quite a number of the listeners and quite a number of our customers as a whole are looking for a retirement property and are sort of retirement age. Are there any age limits on lending or length of time limits on mortgages that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially for potential retirees. There are, in fact, with Italian banks, the Italian banks are traditionally not comfortable with lending beyond age 75. So they'd like to see any loan extinguished or paid off by age 75. So they take that into account when you're working out sort of what you might be able to do. It really means that if you're already aged 70 to 75, it's going to be very difficult to secure a mortgage. If you're aged sort of between 50 and 60, then the bank will look to make the term of the mortgage last up until the age of 75. And with typically the longer terms being 20 years or occasionally 25, but typically they want to end it around your 75th birthday. And that's a real factor to take into account.
Brilliant. Thank you for clarifying that for us, Daniel. Now, much as my question to Trevor about what's going to happen with exchange rates, this might be a tricky one for you to answer, but can you give us any indication on the sorts of interest rates that customers could expect and perhaps, what might happen to those in Italy in the future?
Sure. Well, rates around Europe at the moment are the lowest. Some of the lowest that they've ever been. Certainly, the European Central Bank is in negative interest rate territory, which means you're really only paying the margin that the bank includes on your mortgage to work out the interest rate that applies to you. But in Italy, the lenders that lend to foreign buyers, they do look at it almost on a case-by-case basis, and that figure can change. So it's not a case of looking at some kind of list price or a website indicator and believing that you'll be able to achieve that rate necessarily. But typically today, rates are hovering around 1.5% to 2% for an average mortgage. Assuming that interest rates in the world and in Europe can't stay negative or zero forever, I think that they're going to have to go up at some point, especially as inflation starts to reemerge in the world and the world's economies. But I can't see that happening in the next 6 to 12 months, given the current economic situation, certainly affecting Italy and Europe.
Thank you. That's great advice, Daniel. Now, obviously, we've talked a lot today about people preparing for property purchase and looking at what they can be doing, at home whilst travel is still difficult in certain parts of the world. What documentation and paperwork do customers need to prepare for a mortgage? Is there anything they can be doing from home now, to be sorting that out and getting their documents in order to apply for a mortgage?
Sure. There's a typical if you've applied before in the UK or in another country, those typical documents that you collate for a mortgage anywhere are going to apply. Things like the last 3 or 4 pay slips if you're employed, but also the bank statements where the pay is being deposited. You're going to need to show the evidence of your deposit, how much money you're willing to contribute. So that will be the 50% of the purchase price plus costs associated with buying in Italy. If you've got that amount sitting in the bank already that you can show a statement to the bank, they'll make things much more smooth for them to accept and just tick that box and move forward. If you don't have it, if you're waiting for funds to come from somewhere else, then it'll slow the process. It won't make it easier for an application to be lodged. So they're 2 of the main ones I'd suggest, and also a credit check on yourself. And in the UK, you can use Experian. In Australia, you can use My Credit File. In other countries, have their own credit reporting agencies. Normally, you can go online and order a check and have a look at it. It's a good idea if you look at it first to see if there's anything unusual or anything out of date there before you present it to a bank. That's just a smart way to look after your financial affairs, because the bank will want to see a credit check from the country in which you live when they do their assessment as well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Daniel. I hope that answers those queries for the viewers today. We've had another question in from a viewer today, Mark, who's just asked how you charge for the services that you offer to buyers, Daniel.
Sure. So in Italy, you either are able to go straight to a bank and the bank provide their loan product, and their application fees and other fees are how they would charge directly. Or otherwise, a lot of people use a mortgage broker or consultant or credit intermediary in Italy to access the bank, and more importantly, the right bank, because there's not that many banks in reality in Italy that are ready and prepared to lend today to foreign buyers with foreign incomes. So in order to find that right bank, and even in some cases the right branch of that bank, which is critical to securing a mortgage in Italy, that's why it makes good sense to use a broker. So the broker, we use a specialist broker that's part of our process, part of our team. They are qualified to operate in Italy, and they charge a percentage of the mortgage amount to manage all of the paperwork and the intermediation with the bank. And the first thing I'd say about any fee structure or any service in this regard is that it's absolutely worth saving your time and effort in gaining and utilizing the services of a broker, because dealing with an Italian bank on all the documentation processes and administration and the timeline to purchase is a real big investment of your time, and essentially time is money. So a broker in Italy, they don't get paid too much from the bank themselves to facilitate that process. So you'll find that most brokers charge between 1% and 3% of the mortgage amount. That is the rate that our partner charges. So I can't give you the exact figure until I know more about the size of the loan and the characteristics of the property. Those guys, the brokers, will look at that first before they land on a final percentage for you. And normally, they're quite reasonable, and that can be negotiable depending on the size of your loan.
Thanks, Daniel. I've got time for one quick final question before we must move on today. Tanya has asked how mortgages would work for somebody who's self-employed. Are there any differences that she would need to be aware of?
There are, but as long as you've got experience and evidence in the form of tax returns and financial statements, then you're going to be okay. There will be concerns, and it'll be harder for a bank to approve you quickly and easily. For example, if you've only been self-employed for 6 months, or less than a year, certainly, or in a sector that's different to where you used to work. Let's say you moved out of a job and into self-employment, but it was a completely different sector, and then a bank will find it tough to support that. The other thing that people should consider is Italian banks look at the overall case and put all the factors together. So, for example, if you've got a low loan amount that you're looking for, you're buying in maybe deep in southern Italy, in Sicily, for example, and you're self-employed, perhaps only for a short period of time, that kind of combination, you're going to find it difficult to get a mortgage in Italy. And while I'm talking about, we're talking about percentages and loan amounts too, we often get inquiries for very small mortgage amounts. And I want to try and make it easier for people that are considering applying for mortgages, and let you know that typically you're going to find it hard to get a mortgage in Italy for less than around 60,000 euros. So although there's lots and lots of property in Italy that can be bought relatively cheaply, it's not a case of being able to go into a bank and get 50% even on a very low property house. Banks will not set up a loan and go through all the legal administration for a 20 or a 30 or 40 or 50,000 euro mortgage. Okay, so if you want a mortgage, you've got to start at a level around 60, 70,000, which means a property purchase price in turn of around 130 or 140,000 euros to meet that 50% lending ratio. Does that make sense, Anna?
Absolutely, that's brilliant. Thank you. And I think people do. We always do. People have got specific questions about their specific requirements, and I think I can't stress this enough. We will share Daniel's details, as with all of the speakers, at the end of the session. And we strongly recommend that you do get in touch, because as Daniel mentioned at the beginning, it's not just a mortgage broker service that he offers. There's a whole suite of property purchase management that he can support you with. So we will share those details at the end. And for those specific questions about your personal circumstances, do get in touch. But I want to sort of wind up the budgeting part of the session today, and now move on to the bit that we all get really, really excited about, your property hunt. So just to mention again, Property Guides, our sister business, does have a portal on their website. We've got a range of the best Italian properties up and down the country for you to have a look at and start your journey there. And if there's anything that you do like the look of on that site, we will directly connect you with the estate agent who's selling that property to have conversations with them. But to talk to us in more detail about the property hunt and property buying part of your journey, I'm welcoming today Filippo Corri from Great Estates, who's going to share his advice and market insights with us. Filippo studied languages and has always worked in international businesses and moved into real estate in 2011. So he's very well placed to deal with our British expat customers today. So Filippo, as I have started with our other panelists today, can I ask you to give us a little bit of background into Great Estates and how you can help our listeners today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anna, for the opportunity. As you said, I'm about 10 years in real estate, and I'm a real estate agent focusing mainly on international clients, buyers. And I joined Great Estate in 2016. And Great Estate is a network of agents and agencies. Our main office is in Tuscany, in Siena province, but we mainly focused on central Italy, from east to west coast, Tuscany, Umbria, and Marche. But we do have other branch offices in southern regions like Puglia or Sicily, and in the north like Piedmont. And as I said, our clients normally are searching for a second home, but as you know, also the world is changing, and not only as it was probably in the 60s or the 70s, where British or Germans were buying in Italy. Now they're even more buying as a permanent home, not only for retiring people who retire, but also people who are working, because with a pandemic has boosted really this new kind of smart working, as we can say. So you can work from anywhere, and mostly people are, why don't choose a good place to work? This is in general. So I don't know if you got any specific question.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to ask you what the market's like in Italy at the moment. Obviously, we know that you know, in the UK and Italy, unfortunately, we particularly as nations were impacted quite heavily by COVID. What is the property market looking like at the moment in Italy, sort of based on that?
It's this was quite unpredicted 1 year and a half when the pandemic started. We all thought that we would have faced a big stop, and except for the few months, obviously, when everybody was stuck in their position. But afterwards, the market now is really fast, I would say, considering the Italian standards. We can say that before the crisis, from, you know, that from 2008, when I started real estate, more or less, the market had a big crisis in Italy, and the market was very slow. So in the market, on the websites, you can see properties that are for sale for ages, like 10 years or like that. Now we are selling properties even before putting on advertisement. So it's a very hectic market at the moment. So people is I don't know, probably the pandemic has boosted this. There are obviously a lot of Italians who are coming back from abroad, but international clients are still 85% of our buyers. So second homes, which are becoming more and more resident homes, are still the focus. And so the market is boosting, and the good news is that the prices are not going up still. So I don't have the crystal ball. I don't know before you ask me for how much the prices will go down. Now we can say there is a slight descent or stillness compared to a few years ago, where we have seen, I don't know, 10% every year less. Now there are a lot of visits and a lot of inquiries. So it's a good moment still for buyers, because the prices are probably at the bottom since 30 years. Before they were inflated and reached the top in 2008.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Filippo. Really helpful insight. Thank you. And I am disappointed to learn that none of the panelists today had a crystal ball, but never mind. We will do our best. So just on that topic of you know, costs, could you give us a sort of indication, if we took maybe an average budget based on what our viewers and listeners have told us, an average budget of about €300,000, what could you expect to buy in the areas that you cover, just to get an indication of how far our money might go?
Yeah, well, it depends a lot on the location, because as probably everybody knows, every 15-20 kilometers, the landscape and surroundings are changing, and there are niches in Tuscany or in Umbria or in Marche, which is difficult to be compared, really. So the house in Tuscany, which is probably the dream, you have to specify where in Tuscany, because there are some areas of Tuscany which are probably less interesting than others in Marche or in Umbria or in Piedmont, for example. But that being said, with 300,000, realistically, and if you are looking for a premium location, like, I don't know, Tuscan coast or Chianti, which is normally the first spots where people from abroad are looking for, it's difficult to find a finished and independent house for that amount. First, because the dream house on a hill in stone with a cypresses alley, normally those houses are very big because they were the old farmers' houses, and because of the dimensions, which are typically more than 300 square meters, fortunately the price cannot be so low. For 300,000, probably you can find a ruin to be restored if you're looking for an independent stone farmhouses, I mean, with a pool and whatever. But it is true that with that amount, you can find, or in other locations, independent farmhouses. Thinking about, I don't know, some areas of Umbria and Lazio, or Marche. Marche is probably as a low budget than Umbria and Tuscany. And on the coast, you can expect to have an apartment probably with that amount. Also because it's on the coast, the more you are, the closer you are on the coast, the more difficult it is to. It's not easy to find independent properties because they don't exist.
Yeah. In terms of, obviously you've mentioned, you know, for a long time, British buyers have looked to purchase property in Italy. Are there any areas that you would recommend for expats and things like that? Anywhere that, you know, is a good place if you were a British buyer?
Well, this is very personal. I mean, the choice, because from the 70s probably and 80s, there are some areas. I live in Umbria. I mean, I work for the great estate, which is Tuscany based, but I work in the branch office in Umbria. And here we have niches like in the north part of Lake Trasimeno, for example, where in the 70s or 80s, expats like Brits and Germans were present since a lot of time, and we are reselling second or third generations. So it's difficult to me to recommend an area like or another one. There are clients who want to have an international surrounding, let's say, and there are others who want the genuine Italy. I mean, they want to be surrounded by just Italians. So it depends on how would you like to live your house in Italy. As I said, in the last years, the new technologies, I mean, you can work from anywhere. So you can be an Italian and involved in the community, or you can still have your niche, your place, and the nature if you don't want to be disturbed by no one. I mean, consider that the distances are relative, especially if you are speaking about with I don't know, the Australians or South Africans or Canadians. They consider Umbria very, very close to Florence or Siena, and even the coast, from the coast to the other one, it's a 2.5 trip, more or less. It mainly, in my opinion, it mainly depends. The location should be the first parameter in order to respond to your needs. For example, you need to go back and you need an international airport, not more distance than 2 hours. Then you have to find a radius, and in that radius, then you can start to search. My suggestion is to think about the location first, and then to see what's available in that area. I don't know if I have enough reply to your questions. Quite difficult.
That's helpful, thank you. Now, I do have another question from a customer that's come in, and I'm going to have to apologise to everybody Italian here for my dreadful pronunciation. But Florio has asked if you could tell us if Calolziocorte is a good area in general, but I have probably completely ruined the pronunciation of that word.
Calolziocorte. I don't know that location, to be honest. Calolziocorte.
That's not to worry. Don't worry. What we'll do, Florio, who asked that question, we will put you in contact with some of our other agents.
It's in Lombardy. Sorry, so it's quite distant. It's in the north. So there are a lot of places. It's really difficult to suggest one of the other, and I cannot be an expert of the whole Italy, but yeah, Calolzio Corte I now know thanks to Florio's. It's in Lecco, yes.
We will, Florio, we will get you in contact with some agents that specialise in that area. That's no problem. We'll make those connections for you, and we'll get their expertise to you. Thank you, Filippo, for that fantastic sort of overview on the areas that you cover and your sort of, market updates for us. We're now going to move on to the last stage of the buying process, and I'm going to welcome Fanny onto the panel now. Fanny, I know you've had some technical issues, so I'm hoping that you are able to hear us today. Fanny read law in London and has also completed an international legal practice course, so she's really well placed to work and understands the differences between the Italian and the British notarial practices. So Fanny, I'm going to start off, as I have with all of our other panelists today, and just ask if you can give us a little bit of background information into Tapina Notaries and the work that you do and how you can support our buyers.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. Yes, I can hear you. Unfortunately, you can't see me as you do on a Saturday morning, so apologies for that. So by means of introduction, I'm Fanny Orsini, Notary Public authorized to practice in England and Wales, and I've been working at Tapina Notaries for the last 3 years. Established over 250 years ago and helping 300,000 business over the years, Tapina has the largest team of specialist notaries in the UK. We are called scrivener notaries, which means that we are a highly specialized branch of the notarial profession. We focus on producing and certifying documentation for use abroad in cross-border transactions and often in foreign languages. It's true to say that the first notaries in England were Italians and that they were trained in Bologna. So these historic connections with Italy makes my presentation today particularly apt. In addition to the historic connection, of course, Tapina has a very active Italian department, including 3 native speakers, one of them myself, who are highly experienced and trained in all aspects of our work, both corporate and also for private clients.
That's a brilliant introduction, Fanny. Thank you so much for your help there. I just wanted to ask about the buying process then. Can you give us an indication of how long the buying process might take for a property purchaser in Italy?
So basically what I can advise about is our side of the process. So how we can assist here, basically, this is particularly relevant now for the pandemic. However, this is a service we always offered. If for any reason you cannot or don't want to travel to Italy, the best solution would be for you to grant a power of attorney to a trusted specialist in Italy. This document called power of attorney, or procura in Italian, is a document drafted by the same Italian notary who's handling the purchase, whereby you grant specific powers to your trusted specialist. And this specialist can then act on your behalf and can sign all documents necessary to the transactions, such as the offer, the preliminare, or the rogito. It's possible for you to sign the said power of attorney in my presence, so you can sign that at our offices in London. And after the notarization and legalization process has been completed, the document will be valid and ready to be used in Italy. So that this enables you to handle all the process from abroad if you cannot travel for any reasons, not just for the pandemic.
That's great, thank you. And then will you liaise then on the buyer's behalf with all of the different departments in Italy, so the lawyer, the agent, the notary in Italy, and things like that? Do you do that for us?
Yes, of course. We'll be happy to liaise with any professional in Italy, as you said, the notary, any lawyer involved, any estate agents. As I said, our team is the biggest team at the firm, and we have 3 native Italian speakers, and the other members of the team are proficient in Italian. We deal with a lot of private individuals, like mostly, like for example, I do probably 20 to 40 powers of attorney a week for exactly this purpose. So yes, we always in contact with lots of Italian notaries all over Italy. So north, around Rome, Sicily. So most of the time we happen to already know the notary involved, which makes the communication easier, of course.
Great, that sounds really helpful. Thank you. And in terms of sort of how long the process then takes, so the customer comes and does the power of attorney documentation with you and your team,
Yes.
and then that documentation goes over to Italy. How long does that bit of the process take?
So, all right. So from the day of the appointment, the process can take as little as 48 hours to a week. So this depends. So basically, before explaining this, you need to understand that once the document has been signed, I then certify and attest your signature, and then it goes to the Foreign Office for the apostille. So it really depends on which service you would like to use. The Foreign Office offers 2 services. So the premium service is slightly more expensive, but only takes 24 hours. But if you're not in a rush, I would recommend using the standard service, which is cheaper and takes around 3 to 5 business days. Once the document has been apostilled, the courier, we use DHL because we enjoy a 50% discount, will deliver a parcel to your notary or lawyer in Italy in approximately 24 hours. So if, for example, if you come to the office on Monday morning and you choose the premium service, we can do the notarization process by Monday and legalization process by Monday afternoon, and the document can be in Italy on the Tuesday. So we're really fast and efficient. And I have to say, most of the times there's no such a rush, but it happened before that a client said, "Oh, I need the Rogito has to be signed in 3 days," and they were very desperate because, of course, they didn't want to, postpone the transaction, and we always managed to get everything sorted for them in as little as 48 hours.
That's fantastic. That's such a rapid service. That's brilliant. Thank you, Fanny. I just wanted to ask a question as well, before we wind up this section, just about translation. So obviously you're fluent in English and obviously native Italian speaker. Do the documents get translated? Any Italian documents? Do you do that translation? Does that happen in Italy? What happens with documents in different languages, basically?
Of course. So basically, if the client reads and understands Italian, of course, no translation would be necessary because the initial draft will be in Italian. I will do my notarial certification in Italian, so there will be no translation involved. Of course, if the client doesn't understand or read Italian, I can do the translation myself because, as you said, I'm fluent in English. I'm a native Italian speaker. I've been in the UK for the past 12 years, and we deal with this kind of documents all the time. We also have a dedicated translation department, so we can offer various levels of translations. Of course, if you want a more in-depth, for example, if it's a very complicated and long document, we offer different levels of service. So you can choose like a standard service or a we call it Pro Plus service. So there's a third linguist that will double check the translation. So basically we can deal with most languages in the world. We have Russian speakers, we have Spanish, Dutch, Latvian. Any language you can think, we can deal with the document. We can arrange a translation into Italian. So it's a one-stop service. We can deal from the initial instructions to the translation to the dispatch, the apostille process, as we have like dedicated teams in our firms for each of these steps.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Fanny. That's a really helpful introduction into how the notary system can help and benefit, and particularly, as we've said, at the moment when you're not able to travel and there are restrictions still in place, Fanny and her team can be of real value and real support to you. As with everything, if you've got particular questions or specific requirements, we will put you in contact with all of the panelists today who will be able to help you. Just before we finish, before we wind up today's session, I just wanted to mention our customer service team at Property Guides who are at the end of the phone to help you. Yasmin in particular is our expert for Italy, and she'll be able to talk to you in detail about your buying plans and connect you with the right experts, whether it's any of our panelists today, whether it's other firms. We've got another legal firm, Buckles, who help us with our Italian purchases. We've got finance experts, wealth advisors, removals, building surveyors, all sorts of different businesses that can support you. So the Yasmin will happily help you with any queries, and we'll put you in touch with the experts that can help you. Do also have a look at the Your Overseas Home website. Customers have had some questions today about visas. We did a fantastic session a couple of weeks ago about your visa requirements, particularly post-Brexit, and what you might need to know about visas and residency. We've also got a session coming up in a couple of weeks that focuses on the finances, so looking at your tax position, your pensions and things like that when you move to Italy. So do have a look at our website for any replays on any past sessions and for registrations on any future sessions. We're also going to pop a link up on screen now to the Property Guide site, which has all of those guides and articles and blogs and things for you to have a look at free of charge as well on there. So the last thing I really wanted to just say is thank you to all of our panelists for joining us this morning and answering all of those really helpful questions and queries that we've had in. And thank you to you, the listeners, for taking time to be with us today. Whether you're joining us live on this Saturday morning or catching up with us on demand, thanks for taking the time to listen. And the last thing on behalf of us all, just to say, is we wish you a really, really happy and successful move to Italy. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.